Hello everyone. In the previous videos, we learned about lines, line segments, rays, and also angles and degrees. In this video, we're going to explore the names given to angles based on their measures. So before we begin, let's review your understanding of angles. Suppose we have three angles labeled 1, 2, and 3. Which of the following options represents the angles arranged in ascending order of their measures? In other words, try arranging these angles from the smallest to the biggest. The correct answer is option C, which is 2 followed by 1 and then 3. If you didn't get it, just know that you're here to learn. To see this more clearly, the first angle has a measure of 90 degrees, the second angle measures 45 degrees, and the third angle measures 135 degrees. Now let's look at why the other options are wrong. Option A, which is 1 followed by 2 and then 3, suggests that the 90 degrees angle comes before the 45 degrees angle. But we know that 45 degrees is smaller than 90 degrees, so this order is incorrect. Option B lists out the angles from the largest to the smallest, that is 135 degrees, followed by 90 degrees, and then 45 degrees. But we are looking for the order from the smallest to the biggest, so this is also incorrect. Option D, which is 3 followed by 2 and then 1. This is the biggest angle, which is 135 degrees first, followed by the smallest, which is a 45 degrees angle, which is not the order we are looking for, so it's also incorrect. Option C, which is 2 followed by 1 and then 3, suggests that the 45 degrees angle comes first, followed by the 90 degrees angle, and then the 135 degrees angle, which is the correct order we're looking for. Now that we know why option C is the right answer, let's look more closely at each of these angles and find out what their names are, starting with the 90 degrees angle. Angles that measure exactly 90 degrees are called right angles. Right angles are represented by a small square at the vertex where the two rays meet. Keep in mind that there is no such thing as wrong angles or left angles. Right angle is just the name we give to angles that measure exactly 90 degrees. Now that you know what right angles are, let's test your knowledge. Which of these is a right angle? Remember, right angles measure exactly 90 degrees. And I'll give you a hint. There are two right angles. Alright, so let's review the options. For option A, this angle measures exactly 90 degrees, so it is a right angle. For option B, this angle measures 60 degrees, and since it's not 90 degrees, it's not a right angle. For option C, this angle measures 120 degrees, so it's also not a right angle. For option D, this angle shows a small square at the vertex, which tells us it's a right angle. And remember, the small square at the vertex represents a 90 degrees angle, so options A and D are both right angles. Now, angles that measure greater than 0 degree but less than 90 degrees are called acute angles. An example of this is the 45 degrees angle we looked at earlier. 45 degrees is greater than 0 degree, but also less than 90 degrees, so it's an acute angle. Great, you now know what acute angles are, so here's a question for you. Which of these is an acute angle? Remember, acute angles measure greater than 0 degree, but less than 90 degrees. For option A, this is a right angle which measures exactly 90 degrees, so it is not acute. For option B, this is a 60 degrees angle. Now let's see, 60 degrees is greater than 0 degree and less than 90 degrees, so this is definitely an acute angle. For option C, this is a 120 degrees angle. 120 degrees is greater than 0 degree, but it's not less than 90 degrees. In fact, it is actually greater than 90 degrees, so this isn't an acute angle. For option D, this is a right angle again, measuring exactly 90 degrees, so it's not acute. So the answer to this question is option B. Angles that measure greater than 90 degrees but less than 180 degrees are called obtuse angles. An example is the 135 degrees angle we looked at earlier. Now that you know what obtuse angles are, here's another question for you. Which of these is an obtuse angle? Remember, obtuse angles measure greater than 90 degrees but less than 180 degrees. Alright, so let's go through the options. For option A, this is a right angle which measures exactly 90 degrees, so it's not obtuse. For option B, this shows a straight line, and remember from the previous video, we said that the angle formed on a straight line is exactly 180 degrees. But remember that we're looking for an angle that is greater than 90 degrees but less than 180 degrees. But this angle is exactly 180 degrees, so it's not an obtuse angle. For option C, this angle measures 270 degrees, which is greater than 180 degrees, so it's not an obtuse angle. For option D, this angle measures 120 degrees, which is greater than 90 degrees, but less than 180 degrees. So this is our obtuse angle. But what about options B and C? Don't you think they should have names too? Well, it turns out that they actually do, and we will get to them. So let's review what we've learned so far. Angles that measure greater than 0 degree but less than 90 degrees are called acute angles. Angles that measure exactly 90 degrees are called right angles. Angles that measure greater than 90 degrees but less than 180 degrees are called obtuse angles. Now let's look at the names of other angles. Angles that measure exactly 180 degrees are called straight angles. Angles that measure greater than 180 degrees but less than 360 degrees are called reflex angles. And finally, angles that measure exactly 360 degrees are called complete angles. So that's it. That's all the names you need to know for angles. In the next video, we'll be looking at parallel lines. Stay tuned.